So far in this DVD lesson, we've covered the editing, viewing, and searching functions that Concordance provides. We've also looked at how to build a database and how to load data into an empty database structure, as well as load in the appropriate TIFF images and make annotations. We've seen how redaction and tags are made, and the only thing left really in the document review is the production of the relevant documents. And there are two pieces to these productions. First, of course, is the need to produce the TIFF images with the appropriate confidentiality stamps and also the appropriate bait stamps. After all the tagging and redactions, the images themselves still need to be provided to the opposing side or to the investigating entity, maybe the SEC for example. And second, along with the TIFF images, the various pieces of metadata will also have to accompany the documents. These various fields, which identify the author, the date, the text, etc., are often produced along with the TIFF images. But, depending on the preset agreement made by the lead attorney on your case, not all the fields may be produced. Some fields may be deemed privileged or confidential, or perhaps nothing but the Bates number should be produced. That decision is really one of law and more of a legal issue, while the actual production is one of technology, a technical issue. Remember that back in the initial creation of the database, we started out with a simple text DAT file, DAT file of all the metadata fields and records, the single-page TIFF images, and the image load file. Well, in a production, we want to basically generate these same files, except that we don't want to produce all the same documents, but only the few documents that we have been deemed relevant. And we're going to start this lesson by taking a look at the production from Opticon, meaning the production of the specific TIFF images that are deemed relevant. The first thing we'll have to do for production is to isolate the relevant documents. Throughout the document review, specific documents should have been tagged in some way to identify them for production. Here, using the tags, I'll go ahead and pull up a query of all the relevant documents for production. And as you can see, we have 10 documents ready for production. Now I'll bring up the images by clicking on the camera button. Now production is done by going to Tools and selecting Produce. We see two options here. One is the production wizard, and the other is to open up an existing production settings file. The production wizard is what allows you to specify the criteria for production, meaning things like where the bait stamp images should be placed, whether they should be single or multi-page TIFF images, what Bates number to start with, etc. And at the end of the wizard, you actually have a choice to save those settings. That way, if you're going to make multiple productions over a long period of time, you can simply call up those same settings using this open button. It helps to keep your productions over time consistent. So let's run through the production wizard, which is going to basically be a list of options that need to be set. The first option is the document range. This range will always default to all the documents currently displayed. So we can see that it's currently showing 10 documents right now. I could, if I wanted to, change the range, but in this case, I'll go with all 10 documents. This next screen gives you three choices: to produce new images, to link to existing images, or to copy the images. The Produce New Images allows you to create brand new TIFF images in your production with new Bates numbers, new redaction stamps that will be completely independent of your current TIFF images. Our current image sample here does not have any Bates numbers, and for your production, you'll probably not want to change the default image in any way. There's always a need to keep your current pristine image sets. So by choosing this Produce New Images option, we can be sure that our production of images will be completely separate set. This second option is if you're not really creating a new production set. This option simply provides you with an image-based load file. So if you have no need to burn redactions or add Bates numbers or change your current image set in any way, you can choose this option to generate a new image load file. This is an option you might want to use if, for instance, you already ran a production and the only thing that was missing was an image load file, or if the previous load file was built incorrectly for some reason. This last option does something similar to the link to existing images option, except that instead of linking to the current set of images, it creates a new copy. This is basically a full production without any stamping. A copy of the pristine images is created to separate it out of the production set. Of all three options here, the first one will take the longest because new images are being created based on your redactions and stamping. In a practical setting, I've actually seen Opticon capable of creating about 100,000 images in a single working day, which includes rooms for errors and any reproductions that might be necessary. The second option only generates a log, so it flies by fairly quickly, taking only a few minutes depending on the number of images being linked to. And the copy process is also fairly quick, about as fast as your normal copying done within a DOS or Windows environment. So for this demo, we're going to go ahead and use the first option because we want to be able to add base numbers and confidentiality stamps to the images. Next, we browse to a location of where the images should go. Keep in mind that your image load file will contain the same image path that you have selected here. So it's generally a good idea to keep it a short path. But if you do use a longer path with many nested folders, you can easily change the path information later using a text editor. Here I'm just going to go ahead and use C/production folder and click open. On the next screen we have some foldering choices. Our previous screen was deciding on a main folder. Here I can now decide how to organize the images. In this particular demo, since we are producing just 10 documents, it's not really going to matter. But for most productions where we can run into thousands of documents with tens of thousands of images or more, you'll want to folder them properly. I generally prefer to go with 500 TIFF files per image folder and create a volume every time the images reach the size of a CD. So basically, when Opticon runs a production, every 500 pages will be placed into its own image folder, beginning with images 01, and then the next 500 will be placed in the new folder called images 02, and then the next 500 will be placed into images 03, and so on. And here, using this volume setting, whenever the images folder reach a size of about 650 megabytes, or about the size of a CD, it would be placed into a folder called vol001. So in a large production, I would have first a vol001 folder, and within it maybe 20 or 30 images folder, then maybe vol002 folder with another 20 or 30 images folder. This makes the management of the TIFF files much simpler. As you can see, instead of a CD size, they can also set the size to that of a DVD. This allows you to be able to quickly grab a folder and burn the content onto a disk, knowing that it won't be too large or too small. I'll know that each folder is perfectly set for either a DVD or a CD. One thing I would like to mention while we're on the screen is that you should really make use of these vol folder and image size options. In the past, while litigation support was still fairly new, there have been individuals who purposely ignore this option and simply dump the entire set of, say, 10,000 pages into a single folder. And if any of you have ever tried to open a folder that large in Windows, you'll know that it can be a real pain. Your machine will just crawl. It used to be a really bad delaying tactic that some individuals have used, so please always use this option when you're running a production, and try not to put more than 1,000 images into a single folder. Personally, I think 500 is ideal. Next, you can choose to have Opticon create the image base for you, as well as the image load file. The image base option means that you will get a dir and vol file created during the production, and the image load file will give you a text file for the production. While you can have both, I generally stick with just the load file. The image load file format is universal in that it is simple text that can be adapted by any software, whether it be Summation, Access, Excel, etc. But the dir and vol files are proprietary to Concordance. So unless the party receiving your production has Concordance, a dir or vol file will likely not be any good to them. So I'm just going to go ahead and check off the image load file generation, and then browse to a location where I want the file to go. In this case, I'll choose the same C production path and give it a name, say demoprod.log, and I'll click the Save button. When you're prompted on whether to create a new file, go ahead and click Yes. The reason that this dialog box comes up is because if I wanted to, instead of creating a brand new load file, I could keep adding to the same load file. So if I were to run, say, 5 different productions at 5 different times, I could simply have Opticon keep adding to the same load file and keep adding to the same text information by choosing it rather than typing in a new name. Now on this next screen is where you can create some new base numbers. Now I don't have to use this. I could just use the default number shown here, this 0001 number, as my base number. Or I can create a new scheme. All I have to do is type in a prefix, say PLT for plaintiff, and then start the number with 5 zeros and a 1. The next three checkbox options are important. This first checkbox will rename the TIFF images in your new production set. Remember that our current pristine set of images is actually named after the start page number? Well, checking off this box will create a new name for all your TIFF images in the production set. Instead of the start page number, your new production images will have this base number here that we just put in. So the TIFF images will be named PLT00001.TIFF. The second checkbox will have your new base numbers be the image key. Remember in the first couple of lessons, we learned that an image key is the field within the database that matches the images within Concordance to the image path in Opticon. Here we have a chance to change that to the base numbers as well. And we'll see that result once we run the production. The last checkbox allows the new base number information to be filled into two selected Concordance fields. Remember that currently we only have a start page and end page number. When we run this production, we need a way to identify which of these documents in the database have been produced. To do that, we check off this box so that the new base numbers will be added back into Concordance. Now here you want to make sure to choose the overwrite option, or else the new base number will just be added and appended to the end of the database. Don't worry if so far what I've said did not really make sense. The function of these three boxes will become clear once the production is actually complete and we can take a look at the Concordance results. The next screen allows us to choose where to place the base numbers or any other stamp. There are 4 corners we can choose from, and to add any base stamping we simply choose the field of information we want from the drop-down menu. You can pick any field from Concordance as a stamp, or you can choose the current date or time, or in this case we're going to use the base number we previously decided on, which is the production number, which is the PLT number that we just typed in. Also, instead of using these fields, I could simply type in the text that I want. So I can have the production number on the bottom right hand side, and then on the bottom left I'll use the word confidential. Or if I don't want to use a preset base scheme, I could just type in a base number here and check off the auto increment button. And Opticon will automatically ascend the number counts for each produced page. This is also where you can decide on what font to use and the size of the letters, etc. Here in this next screen, I can choose the format of the TIFF files themselves. The standard is group 4 TIFFs, and I'm going to stay with the single page TIFFs. You can also choose multi-page TIFFs and have the same consistent image key for each page of the multi-page TIFF, though I would not recommend it as it can easily cause confusion. This last box is where you can have your production areas written to a file if you wanted to. Simply browse to the location where you want the log file to go and give it a name. This is helpful just in case the production crashes or if there's some sort of error which pops up. You'll be able to more quickly pinpoint the problem with the error log rather than simply redoing the entire production. A common problem is if the actual TIFF file that you're trying to produce is missing from the network for some reason. That will be information that will be indicated in your error log. This next screen is where you can choose whether or not redactions and other notes should be burned onto the image. Most of the time you'll want to uncheck all these except for the redaction box. That way only true redactions will be added to the image and any attorney notes or highlighting stays off. The no red lines information means nothing will be added to the image. All redactions and annotations will be ignored. And this last option of create red lines to a RED file will allow the annotation and redaction information be carried over to another database for use. This last option is the one we'll want and will probably be the one you'll use most often, if not always. Once we have all our selections, we're pretty much done. All I have to do now is click the Finish button and the production will begin. Before I do that, however, I can also click on the Save Settings button to save the file setting that we just went through. This way, if I run subsequent productions, I can pull up that file and change only the base number starting points and everything will be consistent. Once the production is finished, I click Done. And we can see in the C production folder, I now have a vol1 folder and then an images01 folder for my first 500 images. The TIFF images are now named PLT001 and up. And if I open one of these images up, you can see we now have the Bates number PLT001 on the bottom right and the confidential stamp on the bottom left. And if we go up a couple levels, we can see the new image load file that was created. The new image key was used to match the actual TIFF file names. The page numbers and the path is still there. It's a perfect image load file. And let's quickly take a look at the Bates start and Bates end fields in Concordance, which we chose as our new Bates field holders. As you can see, each produced record now has a proper Bates number. This way I can quickly tell what has been produced from this database and what the production number was. Now that's production from the images end. In the next lesson, we'll look at the production of the data fields in Concordance to match these particular images.